let me try to wrap these up by sort of characterizing, probably to a large extent, what I see from my bias. What I think I presented to you is a view that particularly with these global governance groups and in play, and that we've got a form of top-down globalization occurring, and it's overriding the local quite often. And in a sense, the local, in an organic fashion, isn't connecting with these issues of globalization. Although there is some sort of local filtering that is certainly occurring. All of a sudden we're not sort of seeing all of, for example, China writing for Western audiences. They're fairly selectively looking at, for example, even Marxist theory coming out of the West and seeing how it might apply in different sorts of way in China. So you have a sort of a form of a hybrid effect as a result of those filters. But predominantly, I think the top down is overriding the bottom up. I do think internationalization, as a result of these proxies being so biased towards the West, particularly SSCI, internationalization equals westernization. A bias towards the Americas, the US and Canada especially, and European, and a marginalization of Eastern and Southern scholarship. I haven't talked at all. I've talked about China. I could basically talk at length about Africa as well. And when I think of westernization, it's not like the westernization is, in a sense, international. It's quite parochial. And it seems to reveal an ignorance. Now, probably as a result of the fact that what we need is much more translation or scholars from the East or South educating Westerners. But there is a sort of a sense of isolationism, and which comes across, I think, to some extent as sort of arrogance. And then what you also see sort of occurring and in part perpetuating this is sort of a globalization by these sort of proxies, these international rankings of universities, these CSSI journals. What's really problematic from my point of view, and I've put these things on the right, and I've put these things on the left and a little higher up, and that sort of probably is consistent with the political disposition that I have towards these versus these. There's I think a real major ecological consideration that needs to go on here, and that has to do with diversity. That what ideally you want in globally is diverse epistemologies. And what we see going on globally, as Carlos dos Santos from Portugal has sort of pointed out, is a disappearance of local epistemologies that connect with place and geography and tradition and so on, at the same sort of level as languages are disappearing in the Africas, in the indigenous communities of Australia, in South America. And so we've got an ecological problem here. That what's occurring here is what Santos has talked about as sort of a form of epistemicide. And I think we have to sort of step back and ask ourselves, okay, this is almost like asking people to step up for purposes of climate control, but this is just, I think, as grave as that, is how do we actually support the ongoing support of local epistemologies and a form of scholarship which provides space and fertile ground for different epistemologies to grow and transform themselves in different ways, but not in a sort of narrowing way that I think we're sort of seeing. I think in this sense we have to move beyond our sort of selfish nationalism to a sort of more of a planetary concept, which might mean different things in different parts of the world. I sort of worry that sometimes the word global, it takes on a sort of a singular force, and these conversations now about global citizenship sort of suggest that there is one citizen for this world. And so I think the ecological argument needs to also be made around that, and how we position ourselves might be in terms of the planet and thinking about the planet's survival. And so as we deal with those sort of issues, we also come to grips with what we really need to do is to position ourselves different ethically in relationship to others. So that we're not subordinating, that we're actually approaching others with a sense of participation and a right to self-determination and support. And not using colonization or westernization as a form of empiricism, which indeed perpetuates this sort of empire which doesn't accommodate difference but assimilates it or gets rid of it. And so we need a sort of a critical reflexology here, because while we might sort of stand back and sort of say, oh, well, this is sort of interesting, this is us. This is why I began today's lecture with sort of asking you to think about yourself and your experience, but asking yourself to be a little bit of an activist scholar here and question to what extent you may, in a sense, could become a voice which challenges the status quo, which I think I've fairly well described, lest we become complicit with this perpetuation of this sort of empire building, which is, from my perspective, quite dismissive of others. What this requires as we move forward isn't so simple, because it means we have to educate ourselves. Educating oneself is maybe not as easy as it may seem. What we have to do ourselves is open ourselves up to learning about the intellectual traditions, the rhetorical practices, the scholarship that exists across the world, seeking ways to get to know what sort of scholarship has contributed to, for example, in my field, literacy, from the Asia sector, from the African sector, and from different countries and different parts of the world. And so educating myself means that I need to recognize the limitations of my scholarship and open myself up to others. Michael Singh, an Australian scholar, for example, in his classes, he does a simple thing. He insists that his students include a proportion, his international students, a proportion of their citations have to come from their own country, so that we're not perpetuating that sort of resocialization, that enculturation in the West, that we are supporting at least a form of education of himself, of ourselves, that is certainly not singular global, but multiple global. Okay, well that's it. I hope you find this topic interesting, because what we really need is for people to get involved in exploring these issues through research, and where the conversation goes beyond talking about, but engaging with peoples and with data, so we have a sort of a sense of what is going on. Thanks so much.